Neville Goddard described a mechanism that contradicts the popular law of attraction.
He wasn't talking about repeating affirmations.
He meant something that happens in a single instant, the moment you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. In that act, the complete chain of events between where you are and where you want to be forms entirely. Every person, open door, and coincidence is instantly positioned. What people mistake for slowness is just their physical senses catching up to what consciousness has already completed. Bill Donahue illuminates this by showing the kingdom isn't a future destination, but a state of consciousness you enter now. Most people treat desires as future events and wonder why nothing changes. Asking when will it happen carries the wrong answer, because it presupposes it hasn't happened yet.
There is a confusion that needs to be cleared up before anything else. When people hear instant manifestation, most imagine sensationalist promises, results in minutes, desires materializing out of thin air, reality reconfiguring before your eyes while you're still sitting on the couch. Content that sells speed as proof of power. The faster, the more advanced the practitioner. That is not the territory we'll be exploring. What Neville Goddard establishes is a completely different operation. He teaches that every intention, at the exact instant it is assumed as real feeling, forms what he called the bridge of incidents, the complete chain of events connecting the current state to the fulfilled desire. And this formation is not gradual. It doesn't happen over days or weeks of mental repetition. It happens in the act of assumption. Stop and absorb that. Neville doesn't use the bridge of incidents as an illustration to motivate anyone. He describes a mechanism with the same precision one would use to describe the law of gravity. Once the feeling of the wish fulfilled is occupied internally, the law sets in motion people, circumstances, and events. 1,000 agents, 10,000, each playing a role they don't know they're playing. A person receives an impulse to call someone. An employer feels like reopening a position that was already closed. Someone changes their mind about a decision made months ago. A casual conversation happens in a cafe, and from it, an opportunity emerges that nobody consciously planned. All of them act on impulses they consider genuinely their own, yet serve the embodiment of another person's assumption. The entire causal chain organizes itself from a single point, the shift in state. The first time this mechanism became clear, the way I observe coincidences changed permanently. Because what Neville describes isn't a universe that responds to your thoughts, like a waiter taking orders. It's a consciousness that operates as first cause and recruits all of three-dimensional reality as an instrument of expression. Every person, every circumstance, every apparent coincidence functioning as a gear in a mechanism you activated without realizing the scope of what you did. The question that arises, how many impulses you considered genuinely yours served someone else's bridge without either of you knowing? Compare it to what happens when you plant a seed in the soil. The moment it's buried and watered, the growth process begins. You see nothing on the surface, no visible evidence. But underground, roots are already forming, seeking nutrients, establishing the structure for what will emerge. Manifestation works the same way, except the seed isn't repeated thought, it's occupied state, and the germination doesn't take days. It takes an instant. The word that separates Neville's teaching from everything that became popular as generic law of attraction is one word: inevitable. The bridge, once formed, exists. It doesn't depend on continuous faith to remain standing. It doesn't need you to wake up every day, reaffirming that the desire is real. It requires no emotional maintenance. The causal formation is already complete. The result isn't on its way, like a trackable package you check every hour. The result is already an accomplished fact on the plane where it was conceived. It already exists as reality, simply not yet translated into the language of your five senses. We confuse two completely distinct processes, and this confusion is the root of almost all frustration with manifestation. The first process is the formation of the bridge, instantaneous, completed at the moment of assumption. The second is the perception of the bridge, sequential, unfolding in three-dimensional time, while our senses register, step by step, what already exists in its entirety. It's like watching a movie that's already been recorded. The entire story exists in the file. The beginning, the middle, the climax, the ending. Everything is there, stored, complete. But your experience as a viewer is linear. You watch frame by frame, scene by scene, unable to skip to the end. The movie, the complete bridge between your current state and the fulfilled desire, was recorded at the instant of assumption. What we experience is the sequential projection of that recording through our physical senses. Have you noticed what this distinction does to the question that paralyzes most people who practice conscious manifestation? When will it happen? The question presupposes that manifestation hasn't happened yet, that it's somewhere in the future, waiting for conditions to materialize. But if the bridge forms at the instant of assumption, the manifestation has already happened. What hasn't happened yet is your complete perception of it, the unfolding through the five senses, the translation of causal fact into physical experience. We are not waiting for creation. We are walking through a creation that already exists, and that gap everyone tries to reduce with more intense techniques, longer visualizations, more repeated affirmations, 90-minute morning routines. That gap between intention and causal formation is zero. It has always been zero. Cause and effect are not separated by time. They are separated only by the perceptual limitation of the three-dimensional observer who watches the movie frame by frame, not knowing the entire story already exists. The instantaneity of manifestation is not measured by the clock. It's measured by the gap between assuming the state and the formation of the complete bridge. And that gap doesn't exist. Most manifestation methods share a premise nobody questions, that changing states takes time. You need to repeat affirmations for 21 days. You need to meditate every morning for 6 weeks. You need to reprogram the subconscious, like formatting a hard drive, sector by sector, in a slow and methodical process. Neville Goddard destroys this premise with a single redefinition. States of consciousness are not processes, they are locations. You don't build inner wealth over weeks of repetition. You enter the state of being wealthy the same way you enter a room, instantly, and you leave the previous state at the same speed. The door closes behind you at the same instant the new one opens. This redefinition changes the nature of the problem. If states were processes, slowness would be structural. You'd have to wait for the process to complete, like waiting for a wound to heal or a muscle to strengthen. But if states are locations, the only obstacle is the decision to move. And decisions don't need weeks to happen. Think about how you change moods. Nobody builds anger progressively over 3 days until reaching the peak. One word, one gesture, one memory, and the state changes. One instant, you were calm. The next, furious. The entire body responds. Heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, tone of voice. Everything reorganizes around the new state in seconds. If consciousness already does this involuntarily with emotional states, what Neville proposes is that the same mechanism operates voluntarily with any state you choose to occupy. This should disturb us more than it does, because it means every state of limitation we occupy is, at some level, a choice, not a conscious choice in most cases. A choice made by habit, by identification, by forgetting that the I am was never imprisoned. Edward Art deepens this point with a precision few interpreters of Neville achieve. He works the concept of I am as consciousness before any label. Before I am rich, I am poor, I am healthy, I am sick, there is only the pure I am. Imagination stripped of all definition. For Edward Art, the I am is not one state among others. It is that which occupies states. It is the resident who changes houses, not the house itself. This distinction solves a problem that stalls thousands of practitioners. When someone says, I can't feel that I'm rich, they're identifying the I am with the current state of scarcity. They're confusing the resident with the address. The resident was never the address. They are at that address, but can move at any time. The difficulty isn't the move itself. It's the habit of defining yourself by where you live instead of recognizing that you are the one who lives, not where you live. How often do we introduce ourselves by our address? If the I am is prior to any state, then there was never a real distance between who you are and who you want to be. The distance was an illusion created by prolonged identification with the old state. Like someone who lived 30 years in the same house and forgot that moving is possible. The walls became part of their identity. The neighborhood became synonymous with who they are. But none of that is true. The moment you stop defining yourself by the current state and recognize that the I am can occupy any state, in that moment the change has already happened. It won't happen. It has already happened. Edward Art makes a second distinction that matters directly to the thesis of instantaneity. There is an operational difference between imagining about a desire and imagining from the desire fulfilled. In the first position, you observe what you want as something external, separated from you by temporal distance. You see the desire out there in the future and try to pull it closer. In the second position, you are already inside the fulfilled desire. You look around and see the world from that point. The difference seems subtle. It's prepositional, about versus from. But the consequence is total. Imagining about keeps the desire in the future, reinforces the distance. Every visualization session where you see what you want confirms, at the level of state, that you still don't have it. The very act of looking at the desire as something external perpetuates the state of someone who doesn't possess it. This is why people visualize for months and see no results. The technique is correct. The direction is inverted. Imagining from collapses this distance. You're not looking at the desire. You're looking from the desire at the world. And in that instant, the state has changed. The relocation has happened. Without process, without preparation, without 21 days of repetition. This prepositional distinction reorganizes the entire diagnosis of those who practice without results, because the problem was never lack of discipline or insufficient technique. The problem was directional. I was looking at where I wanted to go instead of looking from where I wanted to be. We treat manifestation as construction, brick by brick, day by day, affirmation by affirmation. But what Neville and Edward Art teach is that manifestation is a change of address. If states are locations and not processes, manifestation never required time. It required relocation. And nobody needs weeks to walk through a door. In The Power of Awareness, Neville Goddard formulates an instruction that seems simple until you try to execute it. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and observe the route your desire takes to realize itself. The route the law determines, not the one you planned. Most people stumble on the second part. Assuming the feeling already takes effort. But observing the route without trying to control it demands something harder. Trust in the mechanics of a law that operates outside your field of vision. The mechanics Neville describes follow a precise sequence. The assumed feeling alters the state. The altered state reorganizes the field of consciousness. The reorganized field projects corresponding circumstances. Every person encountered, every seemingly casual event, every door that opens or closes operates as a reflection of the occupied state. Pure reflection, without reward and without punishment. Just as a mirror reproduces the face before it without judging whether it's beautiful or ugly, Three-dimensional reality reproduces the state you occupy. Neville insists on a point that separates his teaching from all manifestation coaching. Trying to choose the means demonstrates you haven't yet occupied the state. Whoever defines the how, the when, the through whom is managing the bridge of incidents instead of walking across it. It's like buying a plane ticket and insisting on dictating the flight route to the pilot. The ticket already guarantees the destination. The route is the pilot's concern. Whoever is already in the state of the wish fulfilled doesn't ask about the path. The question has lost its meaning. You don't ask yourself, "How did I get to my living room?" when you're already sitting in it. The state of already having dissolves within itself every question about the process. The bridge of incidents operates as an invisible causal chain. Each link appears at the exact moment it's needed, neither before nor after. Others play roles in your drama without the slightest awareness of it. They act on impulses they consider free, make decisions they judge rational, and each of those actions serves the embodiment of the state you assumed. Neville describes this without embarrassment. 1,000 agents moving in service of your assumption, each convinced they act of their own will. The resistance to this description is predictable. The idea that other people involuntarily serve my state seems arrogant. Until the reverse becomes obvious, I also involuntarily serve the states of others. We all participate in this all the time. Every impulse we consider our own may be a link in someone else's bridge. The law has no favorites. It operates in all directions simultaneously for all states occupied by all consciousnesses. Phone calls that change entire weeks from people who called for no reason. Doors opened in places nobody intended to enter. Coincidence is the name we give a link when we can't see the bridge. The operational question is direct. If you serve as a link in others' bridges without knowing, who is serving as a link in yours right now? Bill Donahue, through his work at Hidden Meanings, offers a layer that expands this mechanics into territory Neville only hints at. Donahue establishes that biblical scriptures are not historical records. They are maps of consciousness encoded in narrative. When the Bible describes the crucifixion, the resurrection, the Exodus, it describes transformations that happen within every person, now repeatedly, every time consciousness dies to one state and is born into another. In this reading, the crucifixion describes the moment consciousness abandons the old state. The resurrection describes the emergence into the new state. The kingdom of heaven that Jesus mentions in Luke 17:21, the kingdom of God is within you, according to Donahue, is an operational description of a reality accessible in this instant. The kingdom isn't somewhere you go after you die, it's a state you move into now, and the distance between you and that state is zero. This reading converges with Neville on a central point. If every transformation described in Scripture is internal, and if every manifestation is a projection of internal state, then the structure of reality does not accommodate delay between cause and effect. The delay we experience is perceptual illusion. Three-dimensional consciousness registers sequentially what, on the causal plane, already exists as totality. It's like watching an orchestra from the back of a massive theater. You see the conductor move the baton, and a fraction of a second later, hear the sound. For you, there's a delay between gesture and sound. For the conductor and the musicians, the sound is simultaneous with the movement. The delay is yours, not the music's. Manifestation operates with this same logic. The assumption of state and the physical manifestation are simultaneous on the plane where the law operates. The gap exists only for the three-dimensional observer who needs time to process what is already complete. Cause and effect coexist. Both operate on the same plane, consciousness, and consciousness has no speed. It has presence. The law doesn't need time to function. It operates at the instant of assumption. What needs time is the perceptual unfolding on the physical plane. But the causality, that is already complete the moment the feeling of the wish fulfilled is genuinely assumed. If manifestation were a linear process that takes time, Neville Goddard's technique of revision shouldn't work. Revision alters the past. If the past were fixed, if time flowed in a single, irreversible direction, no imaginative practice could modify what already happened. But revision works, and that fact, by itself, dismantles the premise that manifestation needs time to complete. Neville teaches revision as a nightly practice with surgical precision. Before falling asleep, you revisit the day's events in imagination, not to analyze them, to rewrite them. That conversation that ended badly, you reimagine it ending well. That door that closed, you reimagine it opening. The crucial point: you don't deny the event happened, you replace it on the imaginal plane, assuming the feeling that it happened the desired way. And from that point, the new version begins producing effects on the physical plane. The implication nobody wants to face. If the past can be altered by imagination in the present, then the past was never fixed. The implication is structural, not philosophical. If the past was never fixed, linear time, the straight line from yesterday to today to tomorrow, is a perceptual construct. It's how three-dimensional consciousness organizes experience, not the actual structure of reality. We experience time as sequence because our senses only process information sequentially. But the information itself is not sequential. It coexists. Revision operates on the same principle as the bridge of incidents, but applied retroactively. If the bridge forms instantaneously toward the future at the moment of assumption, revision demonstrates that the same operation works toward the past. You assume the feeling that a past event happened differently, and the law reorganizes the consequences of that event as if the new version were the original. People change attitudes, opportunities reopen, relationships take directions they had no way of taking based on the real event. This is only possible if past, present, and future coexist on the same plane. Neville calls this plane the eternal now, and uses the term with technical precision, the plane where consciousness actually operates, before projecting itself into the sequential experience of the five senses. The first tangible result of practicing revision wasn't a grand manifestation. It was something small, a work meeting that had gone badly, with a remark of mine that created visible discomfort. That night, I reimagined the conversation, changed the remark, felt the relief of the new version as though it were the real one. The following week, the person who was present at that meeting treated me as if the discomfort had never existed, didn't bring the subject up, didn't maintain distance, acted as if the conversation had been smooth from the start. Skepticism about this kind of account is understandable, but the frequency with which this happens for those who practice revision systematically makes coincidence a more improbable explanation than the law. Everyone who has replayed a difficult conversation before sleep and reimagined the outcome has practiced revision without naming it. The question that matters, in the next interaction with that person, had something changed? Edward Art reinforces this understanding when he teaches that the I am does not inhabit time. Time inhabits the narratives the I am assumes. When you occupy the state of I am someone who lived through this traumatic experience, time organizes itself around that narrative. Past, present, and future align to confirm the story. But when you revise, you're operating from the only point where all creation happens, the imaginal present. The I am never left the now. It merely occupied states that included temporal narratives. And narratives can be rewritten because they are not the structure of reality. They are the way consciousness organizes its experience within the structure. Revision demonstrates that the I am can switch narratives without leaving the now. And when the narrative switches, the past changes. because the past never existed independently of the narrative the I am occupies about it. Bill Donahue converges with this reading through the biblical path. He teaches that the events described in Scripture happen within every person now. They didn't happen in a distant past and won't happen in a messianic future. The resurrection, for example, is not an event awaiting the end of times. It is the awakening of consciousness in the present, every time consciousness emerges from a dead state into a living one. When you revise, you are practicing exactly this, resurrecting a different version of an event, operating from an awakened consciousness that refuses to accept the past as a definitive sentence. We treat the past as reinforced concrete, immovable, fixed, permanent. Entire society is built on this premise. Courts judge the past as irrevocable fact. Therapies process traumas as scars that never disappear. Relationships carry resentments like certificates registered at a notary office. Revision reveals that the past is more like clay. The shape it has now is the shape of the last state we assumed about it. Change the state and the clay reshapes itself. If the past can be rewritten in the present, no manifestation needs to wait to happen. Causality is atemporal. What we experience as time is the narrative the I am tells itself while traversing states. And narratives, as revision proves every night for those who practice, were never definitive. Many people know manifestation techniques in detail and still get no results. They know the bridge of incidents, practice the assumption of feeling, understand that states are locations. And nothing changes. The tendency is to blame the law or blame themselves for not doing it right. But the problem usually lies elsewhere. In the interference of the conscious mind with the causal process, the assumption has already initiated. The mind that tries to control the how still operates from the old state. This is the diagnosis Neville Goddard repeats with insistence throughout his entire body of work. Controlling the means is a symptom. If you need to choose which path the desire will arrive through, if you need to monitor each step, if you need to understand the logic of each event before trusting it, you are still outside the state. Whoever already occupies the state of the wish fulfilled doesn't ask how they got there, just as someone sitting in their own living room doesn't mentally reconstruct every step taken from the front door. The question how is a thermometer. It measures the distance between where you are and where the state needs you to be. The more urgent the question, the greater the distance. The more irrelevant it becomes, the closer you are to having truly occupied the state. Surrender, in this context, functions as operational mechanics. You continue acting, making decisions, responding to circumstances. The difference is the origin of the action. Action born from the occupied state is part of the bridge of incidents. It flows without effort, appears as natural impulse, and frequently doesn't seem related to the desire. Action motivated by anxiety is an attempt to manually build a bridge that already exists. It's picking up bricks and mortar and trying to erect from scratch what the law has already assembled entirely on the causal plane. Imagine two bricklayers. The first received the completed house plan and trusts the project, follows the instructions, places each brick where the plan indicates, and the house emerges. The second doesn't trust the project, rips out bricks already placed, moves walls around, questions every decision the architect made. At the end of the day, the first has finished a floor. The second is surrounded by rubble. Both have the same competence. What separates them is trust in the plan. The pattern operated in my own practice with surgical precision. Months of disciplined assumption, followed by systematic sabotage, managing every detail of the unfolding. I monitored signs, interpreted every coincidence as confirmation or refutation. I turned the bridge of incidents into a control spreadsheet where every cell needed to fill in the order I determined. I'd wake up thinking, is it working? fall asleep thinking, "What can I do differently tomorrow?" The very question already demonstrated I was still outside the state. Results started appearing only when I stopped checking whether they were appearing. There's a pattern that repeats in the accounts of those who practice manifestation with consistency. Results arrive when the person is absorbed in another activity, not because concentration has magical power, because concentration on something else interrupts the interference. The conscious mind occupies itself with something, and in that gap, stops policing the causal process. The bridge unblocks. The links that were jammed by our vigilance start falling into place. The best ideas come in the shower, in traffic, in that gap between waking up and getting out of bed. The reason is mechanical. The conscious mind is distracted. The field of consciousness has room to operate without surveillance. Manifestation follows this same mechanics. The causal process initiated by assumption operates better without supervision. Every attempt at verification is like opening the oven every 5 minutes to see if the cake is rising. The very act of checking interferes with the result. Edward Art works this point when he teaches that trying to control scenarios, people, and sequences within imagination generates internal conflict. The I am occupies states. Scenarios organize around the occupied state. Trying to direct every detail of the scenario is like trying to control every character in a dream while you're dreaming, exhausting and ineffective. The characters resist, the scenarios distort, and you wake up tired without having rested. But when you simply are who you want to be inside the dream, the characters adapt. The scenario adjusts, the dream flows. The practice of imagination, according to Edward Art, follows the same principle. You don't need to choreograph every second of the imagined scene. You need to occupy the state and let the scene form around it. The I am, who is wealthy, doesn't need to imagine the bank account, the car, the house, the impressed friends in a detailed sequence. The I am, who is wealthy, needs only to be wealthy. The details are consequences of the state, not prerequisites for it. The simplicity of this instruction deceives, because the mind trained in control resists the idea that less effort produces more result. But that is exactly what happens. Conscious interference doesn't delay manifestation. The bridge has already formed at the instant of assumption. What interference does is prevent you from perceiving the links of the bridge that already exist. Every time the analytical mind asks, "Is this part of my manifestation?" it interrupts the natural flow of the crossing. Manifestation remains instantaneous. The bridge exists in its entirety from the moment of assumption. What changes is our ability to cross it without tripping over our own anxiety of someone who hasn't yet recognized they're already on the other side. Imagine an actual bridge over a river. There is one direction, forward. You could stop in the middle. You could go back to the starting point. But there aren't 5 paths diverging from the center of the bridge. The structure has one direction and leads to one destination. That is the nature of the bridge of incidents once formed. The formation happened at the instant of assumption. The crossing is another matter. The crossing is sequential, happens in perceptual time, and depends on a factor the formation does not depend on: your willingness to keep walking. Many people, especially with desires loaded with emotional resistance, sit down in the middle of the bridge, look around, question whether they're in the right place, walk back, start over, stop again, and interpret this paralysis as proof that manifestation didn't work, when in reality they are in the middle of the bridge the assumption has already built. The fear of being on the wrong path is what stalls the right one. Inspired action is the mechanism through which the crossing happens. That impulse to call someone, accept an unexpected invitation, change course midway, respond to an email you were going to ignore. These actions frequently don't seem connected to the desire. That's why the logical mind doesn't recognize them as part of the bridge. The field of consciousness operates through channels the analytical mind doesn't map. A casual conversation in a cafe can be the missing link. A traffic delay can put you in the right place at the right time. But if you're mentally checking, is this part of my manifestation? You're sitting in the middle of the bridge, looking sideways instead of walking. Most of the links we've discarded throughout our lives were discarded for a single reason. They didn't seem connected to the desire. Both sides of this pattern are familiar. Months sitting on the bridge, analyzing every event like clues in a treasure hunt, cataloging signs as if manifestation were a police investigation. And months walking across the bridge without realizing I was on it, absorbed in something else, until the desire materialized from an angle I never would have predicted. The second experience happened faster, with less effort, and in a way my planning mind would never have designed. Bill Donahue uses a reading that illuminates this dynamic. He teaches that the biblical Exodus describes the journey of consciousness, leaving the slavery of the lower mind for the territory of the awakened mind. Egypt represents the state of limitation. Pharaoh represents the ego that keeps consciousness imprisoned, and Moses represents the spiritual impulse that initiates the crossing. The path exists as internal structure. Whoever stops walking hasn't left the bridge. They've stopped perceiving they're on it. Everything converges on this point. The bridge forms instantaneously. States are locations the I am occupies and abandons in an instant. The law operates through an invisible causal chain that doesn't need your supervision. Time is perceptual narrative, not actual structure. And now, the final point. The bridge, once formed, is inevitable in its structure. It leads to the destination. The only variable factor is the speed of your crossing, and that speed depends on one thing only: how much you interfere with the process. Understanding inevitability transforms the relationship with time. If the bridge formed instantaneously and its structure leads to the destination, anxiety about when loses its object. When presupposes there is a point in the future where manifestation will happen. But manifestation has already happened on the causal plane. The when you experience is the rhythm of the perceptual crossing, not the rhythm of creation. And the crossing happens at the pace you allow it to happen. The more you fight against this idea, the slower the crossing seems. The more you accept it, the faster the links reveal themselves. You are on the bridge now, in this moment. Every desire you assumed with genuine feeling has formed a bridge that exists in its entirety, from beginning to end, waiting only for you to walk across it without stopping at every step to ask if you're on the right path. The bridge exists with or without your faith. What it needs are your steps to be crossed. The understanding that emerges is precise. Consciousness operates instantaneously through states by means of a law that does not fail and does not delay. Goddard, Edward Art, and Donahue converge on the same point, each through their own tradition. Manifestation has already happened. What remains is the crossing. And the crossing begins when the mind stops interfering and allows the bridge to do what it was already designed to do. Neville understood that the secret wasn't in forcing reality to change. It was in occupying the state where the change has already happened and allowing three-dimensional consciousness to catch up at its own pace with what the causal plane has already completed. Today, you can access this state with more precision. We've developed audio tools based on frequencies that prepare consciousness to operate at the level where assumption happens naturally, without interference from the analytical mind, without resistance. To discover how to access this state and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, write in the comments, "It made sense to me,"